Hello, this is John Foster, and we are here again with the Kumamoto Kosen Technical English Seminar, again for our focus on PowerPoints in this particular case. We're going to be looking at how to plan a PowerPoint presentation. So we'll try and go through the steps of understanding in 3 different videos. This is the first of the 3. Okay, so let's try and understand, first of all, how the mind understands presentations. Okay, the human mind, what is different about understanding a presentation from, for example, understanding or looking at a poster session? Well, if we look at the 2 concepts, on the left we have the typical interaction of a poster session. There's a person standing in front of your poster looking at all of the work together. It's kind of a gestalt sort of feeling where all the information can be absorbed quickly at one time. We try and organize so that the audience will look at it in an order. We put numbers on, we put them in columns, and we hope that they will follow the column. But it is overall a gestalt situation where you can see it all at once. On the other hand, a PowerPoint presentation is entirely serial. From start to finish, there's no chance to go back and review certain aspects of the presentation and try and collate them. It's very difficult cognitively, and we see everything one step at a time. So that is different. So what does it mean for a PowerPoint presentation? Well, let's think about how the audience listens. Okay, that's the key question we have here. And for that, we have key points. The first point is to focus on attention, how the audience attends to the spoken word and the visual. The attention mechanism is generally directed by a desire for a takeaway message. Now, a takeaway message is the information, the knowledge, something that you, after when the presentation is finished, you can go home and you have with you. It's a takeaway message. So what does that mean for us? Well, the takeaway message is best organized into the conclusions. Okay, the conclusions of the presentation. So that's what we'll talk about in terms of takeaway message. We'll be looking at the conclusions. Okay, so the importance of conclusions, therefore, is also important for us to look at. What is the importance of conclusions? Well, the first question we need to ask is, when should we give the conclusions? When should the audience receive these conclusions to help them attend effectively to the presentation? Well, here's an idea. Why don't we provide all the conclusions at the beginning? Is that a reasonable idea? Think about that with your partners. Or how about this? Provide conclusions halfway and at the end. Or we can provide several intermediate conclusions. That's also a possibility. Or we can go with tradition and just provide all of our conclusions at the end. Here's another idea. Why not provide all the conclusions at the beginning, at the end, and at intermediate times during the presentation? Looking at these 5 bullet points, with your partners, take a few seconds. What do you think is the best idea? Okay, hopefully you have made a decision. Now, the recommendation for in this course and for preparing your presentations is very clear, based on psychology. You should provide all the conclusions at the beginning. You should provide them all again at the end, but also provide them at intermediate times during the presentation. Okay, now let's look at why this is the best strategy. Let's look at this graph. Now, this is a graph from psychological research on attention. And the question is, when are high attention times? Okay, look at this graph. You'll see the x-axis is the time in minutes and of a presentation, a 20-minute presentation. Okay, your presentation will not be 20 minutes, but this is the typical international conference presentation, 20 minutes. You see that it is separated into an introduction, a 3-minute period, a 5-minute period, 7, 10, 12, 15, 18, and then a conclusion time. On the y-axis, we have attention level. From 0, and 0 is when they're sleeping, all the way up to 9 is the highest attention. Okay, you'll see that we have a curve. It's called the audience attention curve for a 20-minute presentation. That's the title. And we have 3 figures that we're following. The blue figure, the darker blue, is the final conclusions only. Okay, the light blue, 2 conclusions. Okay, and the green line represents the recommendation of this course, multiple conclusions at the beginning, intermediate points, and at the end. Okay, let's go take a look at what psychology shows us. If we look at the beginning in the introduction section, you notice that the highest attention level for all audiences for any type of presentation is always at the beginning. And they're anticipating, they're thinking what's to come, and their attention is very high. But you can see after about 2.5 minutes, we can see that the attention level dramatically decreases. Okay, and that's just the natural human cycle of attention. Now, if we follow the 2 blue lines, they track together a slow decrease thereafter. You see, until about 8 minutes or 8.5 minutes into the presentation, close to the middle, you'll see that the attention has been slowly declining, and then the dark blue split and the light blue split. The dark blue trends even lower and stabilizes at 1, which is nearly asleep. Okay. The light blue trends upward, and the reason it trends upward is at this point we have a conclusion suggested and the conclusion is discussed. So once a conclusion is discussed, the attention level perks up. People start to pay attention more when they're looking for remember, they're looking for that takeaway message, and that is in the conclusion. So the light blue line after the presentation of the conclusion begins to trend down low again and moves toward a point that is still higher than the dark blue line, where no intermediate conclusion was given at all. With both blue lines, you see that once we're getting to the end and the conclusions of the presentation are being readied, the attention starts to dramatically rise, okay, to not very high points, but not as high as at the beginning, but they rise to a high point and they're looking for the conclusions. Okay, but for the most part, they've missed a lot of information in the center, in the middle of the presentation, where their attention was high at the beginning and at the end, but during the middle, for the most part, they missed most of what you have said. Now, our recommendation is different. You'll see that in the the dramatic decline from the high point of 8 or 9 attention at the beginning, the dramatic decrease, okay, also occurs for our situation. But you notice that we've got 3 intermediate conclusions, okay? Now, the intermediate conclusions are very important. If you look, so you've started already at about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes or 5 minutes, getting close to 5 minutes, introducing a conclusion. Okay, and the conclusion brings the attention level up to about 6. Okay, and it begins to decline after, which is natural. But again, at about 11 or 12 minutes, we're going to have a conclusion. We indicate that at 8 minutes, and there's another rise to a peak. Okay, so the attention level stays high, it never falls below 4. So at 4, they're still paying a pretty good attention to what you're speaking about. Okay, then it starts to decline a little bit, but not quite as dramatically, and starts to rise again, because here comes another intermediate conclusion at about 16 or 17 minutes. Okay, another slight decline, and then from that attention level, the rise to the great conclusions at the end, it brings it to a much higher attention level at the end. So you can see the evidence points to having all the conclusions at the beginning and at the end, and presenting individual conclusions throughout the presentation. So the recommendation is, for example, for your presentation, you can have 3 conclusions given at the beginning, and then after you finish one of them, give the conclusion. You finish the second one, give the conclusion. You finish the third, give the conclusion, and at the end of the presentation, you give all 3 again. Okay, so that's the end of our module on the psychology behind the attention and how to of the audience, and how to design your presentation.